That's it. That's the sermon. No, because we're starting our Popcorn Theology sermon series today. Woohoo! And we're hoping it will be a meaningful and light and fun series for our summer. So we're going to start by talking about death. Holy forking shirt balls. Is that too heavy? Let me explain. We're going to dive into some reflections this morning on the NBC comedy series, The Good Place, which is about heaven and hell, morality and ethics, eternity, and also a lot of hilarious antics by an uptight philosopher, a selfish party girl, a narcissistic socialite, and a bungling criminal, all of whom learn the meaning of life amid the vicissitudes of a very absurd afterlife. I highly recommend it. Point one, the characters in The Good Place literally cannot curse. So one of the foul-mouthed main characters tries to say something vulgar, and what comes out is, holy forking shirt balls. The series begins with Eleanor Shellstrop, who awakens one day in the offices of the architect named Michael. Welcome, everything is fine, is painted on the wall in giant green letters. Michael informs a confused Eleanor that she has died and she is in the good place. The afterlife, he explains, consists of a good place and a bad place. And everything we do in our life is calculated in a complicated point system that determines where we will end up. Only those with the very highest scores, he assures her, make it to the good place. He commends Eleanor for her life as an attorney, championing human rights and defending innocent people on death row, then leaves her to settle into a neighborhood with everything she could ever want right at her fingertips. The good place is actual infinite perfection. Anyone can see or do anything they want, regardless of scale or complexity. They can get anything they want from janits, who are like AI angel servants, who fetch good place residents anything they could dream of wanting. The only problem? When Michael describes the point system that brought her there, Eleanor knows right away there has been a huge mistake. She was never a human rights lawyer. She never defended death row inmates. She spent her career knowingly selling fake medications to sick and elderly people and generally leading the most amoral life she could. Clearly, she has been confused with someone else. This is all in the first episode. Chaos and hilarity ensues as more and more absurd events take over the good place, all of which Eleanor understands to be the result of her mistaken presence there. Of course, Eleanor doesn't want the mistake corrected. No one wants to go to the bad place, which in the show is conceived of as a land where demons compete to become ever more creative in imagining how they may torture their charges. So Eleanor decides that she is not going to tell anybody about the mistake and that she's going to spend her eternal time in the good place learning how to be a better person and bringing her point tally up to where it needs to be. She's guided in this work by Chidi, a deceased moral philosopher who agrees to give her lessons in ethics, and by Tahani and Jason, who become friends in their shared hijinks. What follows in season 1 is a romp of ethical philosophy, both implicit in the wild stories that unfold and explicit in Chidi's teachings on a chalkboard about various philosophers. The showrunners had academic philosophers on staff consulting on the show. It becomes clear over the course of the season that none of the main characters are particularly good people, and that even those with technically high point totals in the afterlife are not perfect. It becomes also clear that people's intentions to behave ethically often have nothing to do with the eventual outcomes of their behavior, which is totally unpredictable. At some point in the series later on, in a later season, the main characters realize that the person with the highest point total in the history of the world mostly did nothing at all, which is one of the only ways to avoid doing harm and getting negative points. And so we begin to wonder, as the series goes on, perhaps perfection is undesirable? Perhaps it is impossible? Perhaps an unnuanced point system is not the way to determine eternal judgment. And as our characters change and evolve, we begin to realize perhaps judgment should not and cannot be eternal. In the end of season 1, Eleanor comments upon how torturous her efforts at pure goodness have become, how complicated it all is. And as she thinks about how torturous it has been, she asks a key question. Is this really the good place? Or has it been the bad place all along? I'm not going to answer her question in order to mostly avoid spoilers for those of you whose interest is piqued in the show. But I want to tell you that The Good Place across 4 seasons deeply examines these questions. How good can an afterlife actually be if it is built upon inflexible and authoritarian ideas of perfection? How good can an afterlife be if it is based on an exclusive hierarchy? How good can an afterlife be if it goes on and on without any change? Can there even be a good place that is entirely good? Or do categories of goodness lose their meaning without their opposites to give them shade and shape, without paradox to give them depth? Can we be happy without sadness? Can we be generous without greed? Can we truly live without death? Can we be anything forever, or is forever the problem? And if forever is the problem, do we then inherently need a true end in order for our lives to have meaning? So, just your average weeknight primetime comedy. Let's get back to some light and fluffy. Let's talk about eschatology. Is eschatology not a word you use while eating popcorn? Maybe it should be. Eschatology is the study of end times. The word eschatology literally means speaking of last things. So it has to do with death and judgment and humankind's ultimate destiny. In short, the subject matter of this rollicking comedy, The Good Place. The eschaton is understood in Orthodox Christian theology as the divinely ordained climax of history, the final outcome of all things, the ultimate perfection that can only be achieved when it's all over. Which is interesting, isn't it? That ultimate perfection can only be achieved when human history is done, and none of us are around anymore to mess with it. That is telling about Orthodoxy's view of human nature and about what they're going for in the end, this unchanging perfection. We are here for something different. Unitarian Universalist theologian Rebecca Parker has noted that Western religious liberals mostly reject a cosmic end-of-the-world battle between good and evil that replaces human history with God's empire. And so, she says, religious liberals have come up with 3 alternatives: social gospel eschatology, universalist eschatology, and radically realized eschatology. And she writes that each of these can be summed up in one sentence: we are here to build the kingdom of God on earth. God intends all souls to be saved, and paradise is already here and now. Parker puts her hopes in that final version because she can't quite square the other 2 with what she knows of life. Social gospel eschatology, she writes, we are here to build the kingdom of God on earth, continues to rest on the pursuit of perfection, but simply relocates that perfection into this world. She says of this system, the hoped-for future perpetually condemns the present. And this worldview can even lead us down oppressive paths as we march everyone we can along with us toward our own vision of social perfection. It turns out that social gospel eschatology, still focused on an ultimate perfection, doesn't solve the problem of hierarchical religion. Universalist eschatology is simply too far away for Parker. It's something we can never experience, that ultimate reconciliation of God with all things, because it is still contingent upon an end, a final perfection that seems contrary to what we know of an ever-changing and always unfolding universe. Both these systems are still based in ultimate perfection. Instead, Parker points out as most faithful what she calls a radically realized eschatology, which gives us the bittersweet assurance that ultimate and finished perfection was never the possibility or the goal, but that in an unfolding universe, we can still glimpse moments of paradise in this place and this moment. These days, I find myself in Parker's camp, pursuing heaven here on earth, not as something to create, but as something to experience when we can behave in moments of true justice and love and understanding and compassion with one another. Seeking out paradox in the life we have here and now, turning my attention away from visions of ultimate perfection and toward the presence of beauty so piercing that it opens my heart to loving more deeply and experiencing life more fully. Of course, what comes after this life will always remain a mystery, a point that the good place makes in the end. But if there is some final perfection beyond this life, we cannot know it now. What we are after, what we imagine about that end matters, though. It matters for how we behave and how we love and how we make meaning in a beautiful and brutal life. It matters that we reject an idea of final and static perfection. It matters that we opt into a perpetual enfolding, and that matters because that is how we can live more justly, more beautifully, and more lovingly. Because the things that we frame as ultimate, we cast out from ourselves in body and in time. It is only that which we experience intimately that we can truly respond to with love and justice. And so what if, in matters of how life culminates, we replaced ultimacy with intimacy? Pursuit of ultimate perfection is a forever incomplete journey upward and onward and away from what is. But pursuit of the intimate roots us down in moment, in place, and in relationship. The heaven of the intimate is a love that does not leave us where we are, but neither coerces us towards some particular final end. The heaven of the intimate carries us along in a surprising and mutual unfolding. In contrast, the heaven of an ultimate envisions a future perfection that could lead us to coerce or trample those in our way, or those who move in a different direction or at a different pace. How many times have those who have believed they are on the way to heaven deeply harmed real bodies and lives in their abandonment of the material in this world? Ultimate perfection is the voice of the oppressor. You cannot pursue an ultimate perfection in this imperfect human life without condemning real people and their hopes and loves. The heaven of the ultimate is a colonial horror. Better to turn our hearts to the heaven of the intimate, which is pursued in tenderness, openness, presence, and embodiment, which is pursued in just and beautiful relationship unfolding here and now, in this moment, with the people and the place you are with. And if there is no after and there is only now and here, where are we exactly? Is this the bad place? Full of violence and betrayal, suffering and boredom and oppression and death? Is this the good place? Bursting with beauty we couldn't have imagined, full of the experience of love that is worth absolutely everything, full of pleasure and deliciousness and kindness and hope. Is this the good place or the bad place? Perhaps in the intimate unfolding, as we strive for heaven on this earth, this is just the place where it all comes together, and we live deeply in the truth of all of it at once. And in that depth, find an eternity that does not stretch ahead of us, but that lives inside of us. Perhaps this is just the place, the now place, the place where we can taste heaven and feel hell and choose to show each other the beautiful. This is the place, and it will ever be so, and that matters for how we behave and how we love and how we make meaning out of this beautiful and brutal life. This is the place. And deepening into that intimate truth, how can we do other than to love more freely, make more beauty, hold one another more tenderly? That sounds like heaven to me. Let us make it so.